All right, I'm going to go over some of the headlines that are on my website today and try to make sense of some of the things that have been going on in the last couple of weeks, just to let you in on what I believe where we're really heading. And one of the headlines that kind of caught my eye a couple of days ago was that it was in the Drudge Report. It says superpowers on collision course. And then the main heading is Kerry, U.S. wants no confrontation with Russia. And certainly Russia nor the United States want to get in any type of a war. And don't look for that to happen. I know a lot of people would like us to think, especially some of the end-of-time prepper type people would like you to believe that, yes, there's going to be a world war. We're on the brink of it right now. And to some degree we might be, but not for the reasons that they are proclaiming. But truthfully, at this point, this is nothing more than a diversion for Russia anyway. Frankly, Russia would love nothing more than for this Syrian conflict to go on endlessly. One, because it diverts attention away from what it's really trying to do, and that is to try to manipulate and to hide the fact that it's trying to make oil deals with Central Asia and some of the peripheral nations of the European Union. This, according to one of the latest reports in Stratford. Secondly, this continued upheaval in the Middle East makes Russia rich, meaning that as long as the Middle East is in turmoil, oil prices will continue to stay high, which is something that Russia has to have, since about 70 to 80% of their budget, national budget, is dependent upon high oil prices. And any move or indirect move that can heighten the intensity in the Middle East is only favorable to them. So they're all in favor of the volatility of the Middle East. They want nothing more than this to go on forever, endlessly. And it would not surprise me if an all-out regional war would not be something that they would favor as well. Which leads me to why they would come down and attack Israel. Of course, we know this is going to happen in Ezekiel 38 and 39 in the Battle of Gog and Magog, when the Bible says that Israel will have a spoil that Russia will want to take. In fact, it says the spoil will be so powerful that it will be like having a hook in their mouth that they simply cannot resist. I believe that to be a massive oil and natural gas find that Russia simply wants. But there could be an indirect reason as well. You know, I believe the Bible states that before this war commences, and I believe that the tribulation period, it will happen during the tribulation period, but the early days of the tribulation period. But once peace is reached between Israel, the Antichrist, and many, I believe this Middle East peace, time of peace, will cause oil prices to plummet. Well, this miraculous newfound peace in the Middle East will be horrible for gas prices, meaning that I believe that gas prices will plummet. And that simply will be bad news for Russia and any other oil producing nation and across the world. It is believed by analysts that it takes an oil price of at least between $70 and $80 per barrel for Russia to survive. A drop to 50 or 60 or whatever the case may be dollars per barrel would be catastrophic for Russia and their economy. In fact, ultimately, it would bring about their financial demise, causing their government to collapse. So don't think this scenario is far-fetched and could not possibly bring about a war. When you're talking about survival, this scenario is definitely something that is viable, and I could see happening, especially, like I said, in the face of peace. I simply believe that Russia will need, and simply does need, a volatile Middle East in order for their economy and their financial system to survive. So number one, I believe that Middle East peace is horrible for business, especially for Russia. And secondly, I believe that this war will come about simply because they will see an opportunity to take a major spoil from Israel. And the Bible says that this is actually the main focus of why they will attack. So I look for this to take place. When the rapture of the church takes place, I believe the Antichrist will come on the scene, and he will bring peace with Israel, the Arab world, and many. This calm in the Middle East will bring prices down, and probably to the point of going below what it would take for Russia to manufacture oil. And frankly, it probably won't be too good for the United States either, because right now we are, even though we are one of the leading producers of oil and it's projected to be the leading producer of oil by 2017, I can't believe that it won't affect us as well, because it's quite expensive for us to manufacture and produce oil sands as well. But I'll stop short at saying that the U.S. might very well be involved in inciting a Middle East war from behind the scenes. But don't think for a minute that is not possible, especially, like I said, if the price of oil per barrel were to plunge below, like I said, down to about $50 to $60 per barrel. When whole economies are dependent upon the price of oil, don't think for 1 second that war is not an option to bring the prices back up. Now, moving on to Egypt. As many of you know, there has been a near civil war going on in Egypt as well, where the Islamists want to uproot the current power base, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, along with their leader, Mr. Morsi. In fact, it's gotten so bad that the army basically has said, hey, listen, we will step in if this particular situation begins to get out of control. We will not go into civil war. So as I've stated all along, the military is the real power base in Egypt. They just allow the little puppet players to do their thing, in the political world. But the truth of the matter is the military is still in charge, and I still don't see. I know a lot of people think that Isaiah 19 is taking place right now, being fulfilled. But the truth of the matter is that Mr. Morsi is simply no ruthless leader, and he's certainly not in charge. In fact, some of the headlines that are being said right now, in fact, the bottom line is that some people think that he won't even be around by the end of the year. But here are some of the headlines regarding Egypt. It says, Morsi supporters and opponents clash in Alexandria. Morsi invites parties to amend constitution. Here's another one. Egypt's president admits mistakes. Now, this last headline is not the words, or not something that a ruthless leader would say. If you were a ruthless leader, you'd be like Assad in Syria and say, hey, listen, you live with this is what I want, you live with it and deal with it. He wouldn't be saying, hey, listen, I've made errors and I'd like to sit down and talk about the Constitution and this and that. He would just send out his armies and kill anybody who did not, that stood in his way, as Mr. Assad has done, and now over 100,000 people have been killed in Syria. Well, that simply isn't what's happening in Egypt. Yes, people are getting killed, but it's not by the military so much. And the army has had to step in and to say, hey, listen, we'll let this go so far, but the bottom line is that when things start getting out of hand, we're stepping in and we're going to put a kibosh on this situation. And if we have to sacrifice Mr. Morsi in the process, so be it. So no, I do not think that this is the fulfillment of Isaiah 19, and I think that in time we're going to see that's the case. But we'll have to wait and see what happens as the year progresses. But he's definitely not what is described in Isaiah 19 as some ruthless leader. Now, moving on to Iran. As many of you know and have known for years, Iran is trying to build a nuclear weapons program. Of course, they deny it, and for now, they have failed to come to any kind of conclusion with their nuclear program. And frankly, I don't foresee that being the case. I don't know that they're ever going to actually put together a viable nuclear weapon, at least not one that we will ever hear about or see. Many strategists and intelligence analysts believe that they're following the same formula that North Korea is following. The philosophy of always threatening a nuclear weapon but never actually producing one for the sake of getting sanctions lifted or getting some type of favor with the international community, and especially the West. In fact, the latest projection by experts indicate that Iran is still a year and a half away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Well, if you've been in my website for very long, or my YouTube channel for very long, you know that I have been reporting for the last 10 years that Iran, the experts have been saying that Iran was only a year and a half or 6 months or whatever the case may be away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. It's an ongoing saga that I'm not sure will ever come to its conclusion. And as I said, I really frankly believe that the analysts are correct, that Iran is following the same type of game plan that North Korea has been doing and following for decades. But getting down to the simple facts, does North Korea have a nuclear weapon? It's unknown, but they probably have the means of putting together a nuclear weapon if they want to. And I think that's the same case with Iran. Iran probably has quite a few, or if not all of the pieces to create a nuclear weapon, but simply have not done so. And I think that both North Korea and Iran will milk this situation as long as they possibly can in order to obtain favorable status with the West and have sanctions relieved, as you know, and to draw attention to themselves as long as they possibly can. This is as much a play on being relevant on the world stage as anything else as well. I mean, let's face it, without nuclear weapons or the threat of nuclear weapons, North Korea nor Iran who would even care about either one of them. But this continues to make these two countries relevant on the world stage. Now, here's something I also want to point out. Saudi Arabia has been one of the vocal proponents against Iran getting nuclear weapons. They're standing right next to Israel saying, hey, listen, Iran simply cannot obtain nuclear weapons. And they are terrified that this possibly could happen. But here's something you might want to think about. Israel for years has had nuclear weapons, but you never hear Saudi Arabia say anything, or Egypt or anyone else for that matter, say anything, other than Iran, of course, or Syria, say anything about the threat that Israel plays. You know, I think Prager University said it the best, and this is what the Arab world knows. An Israel with nuclear weapons is simply no threat to the Muslim world. In fact, this is what Dennis Prager had to say about this very situation. If the Muslim world were to come to Israel and say, hey, listen, we're going to lay down our weapons and today will be day one of peace, there would be peace until the end of the age. But if in fact Israel was to do that, were to say, hey, come to the Arab world and tell them, hey, we're going to lay down our weapons and we're going to live side by side with you in peace, there would be war the very same day. Simply put, the Muslim world really simply doesn't want peace with Israel. What they want is their land, and if it takes peace or the attempt of peace in order for them to gain more land, then so be it. That's what they'll do. But Israel, they are actually viable peace partners. They do want peace, and like I said, if in fact they were to come to the Muslim world and say that they want peace and tell them that if they lay their weapons down, they would never attack them, Israel wouldn't attack them, and there would be peace perpetually. Now, certainly the Arab world would disagree with that, but the truth of the matter is that's just the case. There is no case in which Israel has ever attacked a Muslim nation just for the sake of attacking it. But there are many cases in which the Arab world has attacked Israel for no particular reason. But getting back to my point, Saudi Arabia seems to have absolutely no problem with a nuclear-armed Israel, but has serious problems with Iran that is nuclear-armed. In fact, if the truth is known, I would say that the Arab world prefers a nuclear-armed Israel to a nuclear-armed Iran because it makes the region safer. But that's my perspective. Well, where is all this heading anyway? Well, I believe it's heading for a great divide, personally. Meaning all of the Arab nations that have a military alliance with the United States are going to be on one side, and all of the Arab nations that are on have a military alliance with Russia are on their side. And I think Syria is proving to be the great dividing line as we see it. And it is causing nations to line up one with the other. And frankly, I believe that's the reason why that many in and around Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and other countries such as Jordan will not take part in the Gog and Magog war. I heard a gentleman say the other day that he thought it was quite strange that during this Gog and Magog war, that many of these nations in and around Israel are not mentioned, and that is why he felt that a Psalm 83 war was viable, and that it would have to take place before Gog and Magog took place. Well, I disagree with the Psalm 83 war on so many levels, but in regard to this argument, I can easily see from a military analyst standpoint why that these nations will not be involved in this particular war. Frankly, Egypt won't be involved in the war because they have a military alliance with the United States, and even though Mr. Morsi may be Muslim Brotherhood, the Egyptian army commanders and leaders are still in charge, and they are not going to upset, I don't believe, their alliance with the United States, especially with all the financial support that they get from the United States. Saudi Arabia and Jordan are in the same boat. They all have a military alliance with the United States, and with that military alliance comes heavy equipment, such as jets, such as other highly technical military aid. That's why you see when it comes to the Gog and Magog war that it's believed that Saudi Arabia will be one of the countries who will raise up and take issue with Russia bringing about an army against Israel during the Gog and Magog war. I find it strange that just years earlier, or whatever the time frame was, they took part in the Psalm 83 war, but yet now they are objecting to this alliance destroying Israel. That simply doesn't make any sense to me. But others may say, well, what about Syria and what about Lebanon? Well, frankly, it's hard to say what the future of Syria or Lebanon is going to be, especially in the wake of civil war right now. In the end, Syria may be nothing more than a province controlled by Russia and Iran. I can clearly see the day where Russia makes Syria one of its main military ports and brings in a very strong presence into the region through Syria. So don't discount the fact that this very well could be a new staging ground for both Russia and Iran. It wouldn't shock me if Russia took advantage of this civil war in Syria to bring in heavy military equipment and also big arsenals of equipment, along with the personnel to run it and an army to guard it. Let's face it, it's one thing to bomb a Syrian convoy, but it's a whole different thing to bomb a Russian military brigade coming in. Syria becoming a satellite country of both Russia and Iran, I can easily conceive that as being possible. Well, you might say, what about Hezbollah, Hamas, and the like, and Lebanon for that matter? Well, frankly, I don't think Lebanon will take part in this. I think only Hezbollah and Hamas would probably take part in it. And I believe they, of course, the Bible says in Ezekiel 36 or 38:6, it says, it talks about the different countries that are coming down, and it talks about also and all his bands, meaning there will probably be those in the Muslim world outside of the armies of Russia and Iran and other places of that nature that are listed, who will come along with them, that simply aren't named. But frankly, I don't think Lebanon will take part in this, especially officially anyway. I think it will be Hezbollah, and they're not a nation. But I can easily see how this this Ezekiel 38 and 39 war could take place apart from some type of Psalm 83 scenario. Although I will say I do believe that a Psalm 83 scenario is something that is going to take place in the future, but I believe it's going to take place sometime during the tribulation period, likely during the apocalypse or during the Battle of Armageddon. I mean, Zechariah 12:3 does say that all the armies of the world would come against them. And at some point in time, I believe that Israel's neighbors, who have always been Israel's enemies, I mean, we're talking from day one, thousands of years ago. So this isn't anything unusual for Israel to have enemies that surround them. That's the way it's always been, and there's hardly ever been a time that I can recollect in which the nations that surround Israel did not want to destroy Israel if they had the ability and the capabilities of doing it. But one thing I mentioned earlier that I think that you should find strange is that, and like I said, many who believe that Psalm 83 war scenario will take place first, there's a couple things I find strange. The author of these particular scenarios say that the difference between Psalm 83 and Ezekiel 38 and 39 is that during the Psalm 83 war, that the IDF is said to destroy the enemies of Israel. And as I look at Psalm 83, there's absolutely no indication of that prayer asking for the IDF or the Israeli army to destroy the enemies of Israel. It's a petition to God for Him to destroy the enemies. Never does it say anything about any Israeli army or the IDF. So I'm not sure where they get that concept at all. And secondly, I see it strange that that Saudi Arabia will take part in a war against Israel in the Psalm 83 scenario. And these particular authors believe that almost following, right on the heels of this Psalm 83 war, that Ezekiel 38 and 39 will take place, where just after Saudi Arabia has been defeated and had their land taken from, some of their land taken from them, that they're going to rise up and protest that Russia and their bands of Islamic armies are coming down upon Israel. That simply doesn't make any sense to me. I would think that Saudi Arabia would take the exact opposite stance, especially if it meant getting back some of the land that was taken from them as projected in these Psalm 83 war scenarios. I mean, these scenarios basically say that during this Psalm 83 war that Israel would take a tremendous amount of land from the various nations. Well, if I was one of those countries, which Saudi Arabia is projected to be, I would be all about Russia and Iran coming down and destroying Israel and me getting back my land that I lost just maybe months or years previous to that. So as I said, where do I think this is heading? Well, frankly, I think it's heading toward one direction, and that is I believe peace is going to be heading, a false peace, I should say, a temporary peace is going to be heading in the direction of the Middle East in the not-so-distant future. But I think it's going to be coming out of the European Union and not out of the United States. I think this situation in which Kerry, he's on his last legs. I really don't believe that Mr. Kerry is going to bring peace to the Middle East through the United States. I do believe that this particular alliance between the United States and Europe is going to take place. And what I mean by this is that the big free trade alliance, and I think that very well may be the beginning of the makings of the Antichrist kingdom that will come. But the insight that I see on what will take place once this kingdom is created, I believe that the 10 kings under the Antichrist will materialize, but I believe that the United States will dominate this particular core of nations. In other words, I believe there will be a 10-nation conglomerate with the United States as number 11. But through this economic cooperation, free trade agreement, I think the United States will be the dominant role figure in this situation. And once Satan enters the Antichrist somewhere around the middle of the tribulation period, as you know, he will have nothing of the United States being the dominant role, but they will have to be removed. For Satan would not allow God to rule over him. He's certainly not going to have some earthly kingdom dictate what he is going to do and not going to do. So I speculate, I should say, that this free trade agreement between the EU and the U.S. will probably bring about a super economic and military alliance between the United States and the European Union. But I believe it is unlikely that it will end well. Well, that's all I have for today. I usually like to close with one thing said, and that is that if you don't know the Lord as Savior, you need to, because your time is running out. This is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.